There are stories and events throughout history that are so compelling and so often told that they're almost universally known. In almost every case, however, there's the familiar story, and there's the fallout that often goes overlooked by history. Every event alters the future in some way, and one small decision here or there can drastically change the outcome of our lives. While we're all likely at least familiar with the story of President Abraham Lincoln's assassination in 1865, there's another story that began that night so strange, you might be surprised it's not more widely known. This is the story of Henry Rathbone. The stage was set behind large red velvet curtains as an eager audience awaited the evening show. Actually, there were going to be two shows this night. One was a play called Our American Cousin, and the second was the arrival of President Lincoln. It was April 14, 1865 at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., and just less than a week earlier, an end to the brutal American Civil War finally arrived when the South surrendered. There was no doubt that the war took a toll on the president as the future of the United States of America hung in the balance for just shy of 4 years. With all that going on and weighing heavily on Lincoln's mind, there was no time to relax. Now that the war was over, the president was looking forward to unwinding by enjoying the comedy on the bill at the theater. As the orchestra tuned up and the crowd murmured, cheers suddenly broke out as the president appeared in the balcony to the right of the stage. He smiled and waved to the overjoyed crowd before settling in for the show, and shortly after, the lights dimmed and the curtain rose. Around 10:15 that night, the play was nearing its conclusion when a man named John Wilkes Booth made his way up the back staircase toward the balcony area. After loitering around outside for a few moments, almost as if to summon the nerve for what he was about to do, Booth opened the door to the president's balcony and stepped inside. Standing no more than 4 feet behind the president, Booth raised his pistol and fired a bullet into the back of Lincoln's head. This is a well-known story for many reasons. Lincoln was a highly respected and revered leader who preserved the Union, but he was also the first president of the United States to be assassinated. The nation went into mourning as Lincoln's body was transported by train from city to city so that all Americans could pay their respects before his burial. While all this was going on, a United States military officer and lawyer named Henry Rathbone was beside himself with grief and regret. The president and the first lady weren't the only ones in the balcony that night. Sitting right next to them was Henry and his fiancée Clara Harris, both longtime friends of the Lincolns. After Booth entered the balcony and the shot rang out, Henry turned to see a cloud of gun smoke just behind the president, who was now slumping forward. Henry grabbed Booth, who managed to wiggle his way out of Henry's grip. Dropping the pistol he just used to shoot the President of the United States, Booth grabbed his dagger and thrust it towards Henry's chest. Henry was able to deflect the blade, but it still managed to slice open his left arm, from his elbow all the way to his shoulder. After the failed attempt to mortally wound Henry, Booth turned and climbed the ledge of the balcony to jump onto the stage. And just as he was about to leap, Henry recovered enough to grab the back of his coat, causing Booth to lose his balance, which altered his jump just enough to make for a rough landing. It's believed Booth broke his leg as a result when he hit the stage. Henry shouted for somebody to stop him, but despite some in the audience giving chase, the injured Booth got away. For 12 days, the assassin remained at large before eventually ending up dead, which is a story for another time. After Booth made his escape, Henry turned to the president and knew that this was not a good situation. He went to the door of the balcony but found it barricaded. After a considerable effort by Henry and those outside the door to open it, doctors entered the balcony to assess the president's wound before having him carried to a house across the street. As several men picked up the president and began to move him, Henry asked another military officer to assist him in helping Mrs. Lincoln across the street. But shortly after the request, Henry passed out from blood loss. Clara rushed to his aid and held his head in her lap as another doctor looked him over. The slash to Henry's arm was much worse than initially believed, as the blade cut all the way to his bone and severed an artery. Henry was taken home where he would make a full recovery, but this is not where his story ends. Henry was born in 1837 in Albany, New York. A bright and cultured young man, he was the son of the city's mayor. His father died an untimely death, leaving Henry's mother to raise him and his brother Jared by herself. In the years after his father's death, Henry's mother would meet a man named Ira Harris and remarry. The union gave Henry 3 new step-siblings, William, Louise, and Clara, the woman Henry would marry in 1867. The couple had 3 children, and from all outside appearances, they were living a happy life. But even those closest to them didn't know the truth. In the aftermath of the assassination, Henry may have improved physically, but his mental health plummeted as a result of the trauma. He agonized over not being able to save the president from being shot, and he was understandably never the same. He was convinced that he could have done more, and the local rumor mill was too, as Washington, D.C. gossiped about Henry's failure. No one could have guessed at the time just how far he would spiral, but there seemed to be no bottom. He left the military in 1870 and struggled to maintain a job due to his mental state. Before long, Henry grew more and more paranoid, eventually convincing himself that Clara was cheating on him. He also resented how much attention she gave their children. In his mind, Clara was secretly planning to divorce him and take the kids, but there was no evidence to suggest this. Clara, meanwhile, was suffering from her own trauma-related problems. After Henry was taken home the night he was slashed by Booth, she returned to the house across the street from Ford's Theater to comfort the First Lady. When the president took his last breath, Clara was among those in the room. For years after the night of April 14, 1865, Clara kept her blood-stained dress in the back of the couple's closet. One night, however, Clara swore that she saw the president's ghost near her dress, and instead of just getting rid of it, she had the closet bricked up, according to family lore. As the 1870s wore on, Henry continued to look for work and turned to the US government, hoping to secure a position as a United States consul. Such a job is vital for US international relations, as the consul lives abroad and facilitates commercial and diplomatic relations between America and the country a consul is assigned to. Under President Chester A. Arthur, Henry finally got his chance when he was appointed the consul to Germany. He packed up the family and they relocated there, hoping that a fresh start somewhere else would be exactly what he needed to move on from the event that was plaguing him. While it appeared Henry's life was finally getting on track, however, his mental stability continued its backslide. This led to the horrifying events of December 23rd, 1883. Henry, Clara, their 3 children, and Clara's sister Louise were all enjoying a night at home as they waited for Christmas to arrive. He acted as though someone was breaking into the house and attempting to kidnap the children. Louise took the kids to their bedroom and locked them inside, while Clara ran to the couple's bedroom. Henry followed right behind her, and once they were inside, he pulled out his pistol and shot her 3 times in the chest. As she laid on the ground, Henry pulled out his dagger and stabbed her multiple times, including once directly in her heart. Then, he turned the knife on himself as the life faded from Clara's eyes. It was a horrible scene that Louise discovered, and it appeared as though Henry would eventually succumb to his self-inflicted wound, but he survived. Murdering his wife only worsened his mental state, and he became a rambling, delusional mess. He was declared insane and committed to an asylum in Germany, where he eventually died in 1911. In perhaps one of the most tragic twists of this story, Henry and Clara weren't even supposed to be at Ford's Theater that night. The president first extended the invitation to Union General Ulysses S. Grant and his wife Julia. But while there was great admiration and respect between Lincoln and General Grant, Julia despised the First Lady and refused to be in the same balcony as her. The president had a list of potential invitees, including Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, but everyone they asked to accompany them to Ford's Theater that night turned them down. Henry and Clara were indeed close friends of the Lincolns, but for unknown reasons, they were far down on the invite list. Had any one of the other couples the president invited accepted, the story of Henry and Clara Rathbone likely would have concluded much differently. Thank you for taking a trip through the past with me. If you like the story, please consider giving it a thumbs up, commenting, and even subscribing. I'm also taking story suggestions, so if there's something you'd like to see from more than 100 years ago here, let me know in the comments. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time for more chilling history.